Hello, good people. My name is Bill Schiller. I'm from a Nordic LGBT cultural organization called Tupilak. Works together with an international ILGCN beyond the Nordic area. We're here to talk about history and culture. And I have two very, very strong members of the Swedish cultural community with me here. Why history? Why culture? We all know that the battle is to change the laws, or is also the battle to make ourselves visible so that people can hear us and see us and know that we're here. History, we all know that history is just a pile of dust. Or is it more? A people who don't have history have no presence and have no future. Especially when our enemies say, you have done nothing, you have contributed nothing with music or art or medicine or whatever. And the truth is, LGBT people have contributed enormously to history and to culture, both just as important as changing the laws. Because sometimes you change the laws and you haven't changed people's minds. With me today, two strong people in the Swedish cultural community, Anna-Marie Sorberg, a writer, a journalist. Just how important is journalism and writing books for getting your message across?
Oh, since I am a journalist, I have to say that it's extremely important. But I definitely think it is. I mean, writing for me, both when I was young, but as a continuing thing through my whole life, has been essential. Writing and reading and talking. So journalism is maybe more a method to me. It's a way of putting a tool, using a tool and putting it together and making it possible to talk to people, create alliances and talk to people from many, many different parts of not only the world, but of life in general. So for me, these things are crucial, and I can't say how crucial I think. I will hopefully keep on doing it, hopefully as long as I'm here on the earth.
Difficult for an LGBT person to break into journalism and to writing books? Do people say, but what do you know? Why should you speak? Difficult?
You're asking me if it is difficult?
Yes.
I mean, journalism as a craft is a work that has changed, or a profession that has changed enormously. So, I mean, I guess every profession changes constantly, but I would say journalism from when I started working, when I was 18 or 20, and what it's like today, I don't even know, I would say, because today I work much more as an independent writer. I would think that a lot of the journalism is very, very hard in the way that it's very that if you end up in a magazine or a TV or channel or something, that it has very, very tough commercial rules where you have to produce a lot of text, a lot of work all the time in order to justify your salary. And that is usually not the best way to be able to do something very, very interesting or challenging, that you have to work quick and make it really produced in a very, very simple and fast way. On the other hand, during this time, we've seen a huge democratization of publications. So, I mean, basically all you need is a web hotel somewhere which you can get pretty cheap, and then you can start to write. your texts and start interviewing people. You will not probably make a lot of money, I don't think, but I mean, who cares? It's a great way of reaching people. So, I mean, it's a very different, completely changed arena, I would say, from when I started working. And at that time, when I started working, I would say that issues around sexuality and gender, in the beginning I worked a lot with the National Public Radio of Sweden. Then it was much more considered, these issues, sort of like, well, maybe we can, as we would say in Swedish, kvotera in, like one or two. You can do one or two stories on this topic, but the rest has to be normal topics. So, whereas today, I would say that if you would work with these issues and you would have a history like I do, where I've followed these issues a lot over the years, I think that would be considered much more of something where that would probably be considered something good today, that I'm an expert on something, instead of this idea that, oh, we have to be really careful of her covering these issues because she's speaking from her own, agenda or something. I think in that sense, it probably, at least in some parts of journalism, it's a good thing that you have knowledge. Good. I'm trying to be optimistic here, so I'm not sure that it really is this positive, but I would say
we'll come back to you. Yeah. Jan Hammarlund, veteran singer, songwriter, performer, together with many solidarity groups in Chile and other countries, and also in the Swedish leftist movement looking for human rights and justice. How important is this culture, the cultural field, for you?
Well, I think different people handle it in different ways. I started in the early 70s writing songs and recording them, and got an audience, and so at some point I thought I should use it to promote gay liberation, as we called it back then. I figured out the subject was so taboo. It wasn't like anybody was opposing us. Very few people actually opposed us, but mainly people just were so frightened of saying anything about gay people, homosexuality, or whatever. And that's where humor comes in, I think. I think I used it in some of my... I'm not a very humorous person. In fact, I'm the kind of when I make a song list, I have to check. They have a laugh here, okay. And this one is a funny song, okay, so they can bear the rest of the stuff, But I think I managed to I wrote a little song called Ville in 1979. I was sitting in Malvina Reynolds. Malvina Reynolds was a legendary socially orientated political songwriter, born in 1900 actually, and I befriended her. So I learned a lot from her, and I was sitting in her garden, and I was thinking, how can I possibly, write something that can really help give some momentum to the movement, because we did have demonstrations, as we called them then, and so forth. And so I tried to write a song that was like a folk song, like a song you sing sitting in the kitchen while your grandma is baking bread or whatever, which is quite different from the more glamorous, slightly hysterical, sentimental songs that you hear a lot of the time over the radio and where all the media. In order for people to recognize, themselves in the song, and it had a few laughs, which I think was very important. And I've been included, one or two gay songs on every single album I've made since then. So I guess I've contributed in some sense. But What was the question, actually? I
How
got so
important
carried
culture
away.
is, and music.
Yes, of
Maybe
course,
it
generally.
should more direct. Why music makes us lift.
Yeah, well, it's an emotional medium, an emotional kind of relating to people, of course. So you reach people, and what Malvina Reynolds also stressed was that you can write. Sometimes you need campaign songs, you know, that speaks out very clearly and not very artistically. Against injustices and so on. But what Malvina said was that most of the time it's much smarter to write a song in the form of a story, and not, you know, so that you influence people without their actually realizing that they're under the influence of a song and a troubadour or whatever. And if you can do that a great deal, I think you achieve a lot.
I'd like to say that 30 years ago, we made a cabaret for ILGA, the international movement, talking about legislation. We said, how about a cabaret? They never heard of a cabaret. We said, yeah, we're going to give you a cabaret, song, music. At that time, we had 2 musicians, gay, lesbian, on the stage. Jan Hammarlund was one. Eva Hansson, who is still making music and as a core leader is still doing. No one else. Now we have many. But you have to remember, just back a few years, a few decades, nobody dared to come out. Why? Afraid of losing your job. Not sure you could be thrown out of television or radio or from the theater. And we still have friends who come out at the television or radio or somewhere in the Baltic area or the Eastern Europe, losing their jobs. That's why they don't have 100 gay and lesbian artists coming out. America has many now, but a few years ago, very few, almost none. I would like to show you 2 short films if we have time. We probably won't. But one I will show you, Jan Hammarlund helped to make it. B.T. Anderson, a cartoon person who makes cartoons. She's not with us today, but but this film is just a few minutes long, and it's history. It's not only culture with music and drawing, but it's history. And if you think gays never went to prison, yes, they did. If you think gays never got executed in this country, yes, they did. But we don't always know our own history. Please, this film...
Maybe we should just say a short
Go ahead.
word about what the film shows.
Okay.
This stems from a book that was written by an historian who managed to find some documents of 2 gay men in the 1880s. So it's quite a while ago. And he was able to track down what had happened to them because of the simple fact that they were prosecuted in court. So that there were a few documents, you know, and he had to go to the archives and so on. But that's really the kind of... And his thesis, this historian, Olle Holmqvist, was that we tend to assume that it's been the development has gone from really horrible oppression in every kind of way, and then sort of steadily upwards towards better. But in fact, you know, what he says is that in many ways, a gay man in the 1950s was worse off than these 2 guys in the 1880s. So that's the...
I just want to say, for you people who don't speak Swedish, it's simple. I'll give you a translation at the bar right afterwards. But it's so, 2 men fall in love, have a bit of sex, go to jail, come out. But that was the reality for some of us then, at that time.
I think it was forced labor, but it amounts to the same thing, kind of.
Okay. Can we see the film? Oh, yeah.
I Stockholms 1880-tal var det bostadsbrist och nöd. På fabriker och grosshandlarfirmor i stan fick man slita hårt för sitt bröd. Men så stod han där en dag med sin trasiga hatt och en halvdant trimmad mustasch. Och mitt hjärta slog volter, jag blev alldeles matt första gången jag fick syn på Lars. Han log och han frågade snällt och försynt om han fick följa med upp en sväng. Fast det var lite ovant så fick han en kyss och vi hamnade i samma säng. Mot naturen, det känns så rätt. Tekniken går ju framåt på alla sätt. Kinstugatan 9 och en madrass för 2 där vi turades om och sätta på.
I de fattigas del av de härskande stad fick vi tag i ett eget kryp in. Våra grannar begrep väl vad som stod på, men det var ingen som sa någonting. Varken de eller vännerna angav oss 2. Ingen frågade varför och hur. Fastän lagen var tydlig, det kallades krasst för otukt mot vår natur. Mot naturen, men vad då för en natur? Såna saker gör ju till och med djur. Kinstugatan 9 och en madrass för 2 i ett litet rum i en egen vrå.
Första maj med Palm och de andra till Gärdet där Kata höll tal. Det var flaggor i topp och en ljusnande tid där vi byggde vår egen moral.
Kata Dahlström sa att hon gav aldrig råd om kärlek och vad som går an. Men när hon reste bland rallarna såg hon ju män som kelade ömt med varann. Kärlek mellan män, men det känns så rätt. Kropparnas berusning bortom sans och vett. Kinstugatan 9, ingen av oss 2 kunde minnas vem som först kom på. När världen är iskall och jobbet för tungt får man finna tröst där man kan. Vi levde för kvällarna när vi kom hem och fick värme och kraft av varann.
I Ekbacken sa han en sen sommarkväll:
får man sätta på dig ett tag?
Det kan du väl få, svarar jag då, för det var ju hans tur idag.
Mot naturen bortom vett och sans, kropparnas berusning för mig och Frans. Såna brott kan man lätt begå i en skymningstimme som är blå.
Men i buskarna låg snokande fiender på lur, 2 gardister med servila maner. Lasse ställde sig upp och han sa som det var:
ja, vi knullar, vad angår det er? För det angick ju ingen att vi höll ihop, men de föste oss med till polis. Och vi fick några månaders fängelsestraff av en obildad borgarjustis.
Mot naturen, vem kunde tro att vi skulle gå över suckarnas bro och hamna i varsin ensam cell? Hur kan kärlek vara kriminell?
Man får ingenting gratis, och mitt i all fest är det viktigt att alla förstår. Står ni upp för er själva och hävdar er rätt, då går ni i våra spår.
För visst var det en strid och en hjälteinsats där vapnet var lust och passion.
Vi stod upp för oss själva, så blev vi en del av vår svenska revolttradition. Genom sekler hörs en refräng från 2 svettiga karlar i en säng. Kinstugatan 9 och en madrass för 2 där vi turades om och sätta på.
Sova lite ändå.
Good folk, kommentar, any comments? I know you're waiting for the translation at the bar, and that's expensive, but don't worry. I'll pretend not to know. Good folk, film, history. Anna Marie writes about history too. It's important. I just want to say this. There are some LGBT organizations that agree that history is important. In the United Kingdom, they've had the History Month, the LGBT history, for the last 15 years. And I was invited there once, and I said, gee, it's Great Britain, they got a lot of people, they can do what we can't do. And then I was invited to Budapest. And I thought, Budapest? How many LGBT VIPs do they have there? They don't get any support from the state? Nothing. How can they have a History Month? What's the matter with us? Ireland has it. Berlin has it. Canada has it. Australia has it. What's the matter with the Nordic area? So that's why we started a few years ago LGBT History Month. Not Swedish, but Nordic. Because we really have some top people. I won't take time now to tell you what smashing pioneer people we have LGBT from history. Well, I'll give you one example. You know the Ugly Duckling? Who was it? Who wrote the Ugly Duckling? Hans Christian Andersen. Yes, we got a couple of mega people. Wallenberg, ever hear about a man called Wallenberg? Raoul Wallenberg saved thousands and thousands of Hungarian Jews. A gay man. We have history filled with mega voices, mega people, and it's good that we bring them forward. I want to say, history, how do you have a feeling that history is to dedicate history, or we got to go forward, or is history something they're tackling?
It's always both, I would say. I mean, I think it's history is not, at least for me, something that you look to for sort of sentimental or melancholic reasons. It's a way of always understanding what is actually happening right now, to know the history and go back to the history all the time and think about it. And it's never done. We will understand more and more constantly when we go back to history. I'm also very, what word to use? I'm also very interested in this, what you also brought up, Jan, about history not being as it's sometimes being presented as something very linear, where you are sort of going from shame to success. Mm-hmm. Because I do think that this very simplistic idea has also caused a lot of problems for all of us, because it not only makes us like not understanding what actually is going on and how things change, and that it's constantly that we need to work on many different levels when we are doing activism and stuff. But it's also much easier to sort of steal or use our struggle for other reasons, when you have this very simplistic way of telling the history. Because if there was once upon a time shame and now it's only success, then there is no point really in doing any more work, which I do think is bullshit, obviously. So, I mean, for example, once you go into this, the beautiful song that you did now, and you start to think about, like, oh, what happened to these guys?
Yeah. They were all right.
Were they all right?
Yeah,
after
one of them died of TB for decades later and so on, but you know that it wasn't related to their time in the prison.
And there are so many like questions that, at least to me, come to my mind, like that they were very political, obviously, in many different ways.
We think so, yes.
Yeah, and also to imagine who would they have been today, like what would they have thought about the organization today. It's I think that the more you know about its history, the closer it comes to over the years. I mean, for example, now I'm looking into a lot of the past 100 years, and I'm on my table home. The book I'm reading now is called No Modernism Without Lesbians, for example, which has this. It's writing about the 1920s and how avant-garde lesbians were like so strong in creating this the notions around queerness and in Europe, and of course many of them were also very privileged because it was one of the ways of being able to do all these, like writing and drawing and artwork, that you had money so that you could spend your time doing this. But nevertheless, it's still a very important part of our history to know this, how a group of lesbians, and they had tons of drama and they're jealous about each other, like basically the same things as we are always going through all the time, but at the same time also creating so many things in terms of books and stuff. So I think it's great to look into these things, and again, I think that it feels like it's almost like you can hear them breathe, the more you go into this part, it's like you can imagine more and more what it was like, and not sort of go into this distance about, it must have been horrible for them and now it's so good for us, because that story is usually never really very accurate.
A historical question for Janne. You people who are younger, the early times of Pride in Stockholm, when they had a cabaret or something, there were almost no gay, lesbian singers, musicians to come out. So we had famous Swedish artists, Monica Zetterlund, and people who were hetero, well-loved, and filled with solidarity, came and sing their songs for us. And when we made this cabaret that I mentioned for you for the ILGA, we said, thank you, but we want to sing our own songs. And when I said Jan Amler was one of the first, and Eva Hansson, to come out, that this is a long time ago. How was it those early years when you were like the only gay open performer on stage?
I can tell you one little story.
Yes.
They were doing an interview with me for a piece in one of our major newspapers, and we talked for quite a while. Very sympathetic reporter, journalist, and so on. And I asked her. Fortunately, I asked her to read this article before it went into print, and I was quite surprised because there was no mention. I mean, I talked about at great length. I think this was about 1976 or 77. I talked about at great length about being gay and so on, and it wasn't mentioned anywhere in the article. So I phoned her up, and I said, what about all the things I told you about the love of men and so on? And she said, I never thought you wanted me to include that in the article. And I said, yes, I do. I'm very definitely. And she says, I can't handle that. And so I said, well, yes. So if I write 10 lines about this, can you include it in the article? And she said, yes. So that's an example of.
Yes.
It was taken for granted that this was in confidential stuff between the two of us.
But you see this with history. If no one has come out in Bulgaria or in Latvia, or if no one has come out whatsoever, it's awfully hard to be the first one. You don't know if you lose your job, you lose your teeth. One very talented man from the Faroe Islands did radio programs and music and played guitar. He came out and was immediately beaten up by hooligans in the street, badly, ended up in the hospital. They kept calling his house in the Faroe Islands, you bastard, you faggot, etc., etc., etc. He went back and forth to the mental hospital because of depression and slowly took his life Rasmus Rasmussen. And when we dedicate our LGBT monument, we're going to put his name somewhere on the plaque because he was sacrificed by homophobia, by coming out. And you have to remember, Stockholm, for those of you coming from other cities, might think this is a tiny village. But compared to the Faroe Islands, there's no place to go when there's only a small village. You can't come out and then hide. If the hooligans are after you, you're in trouble. And in Stockholm, you might say the same thing. But smaller towns, and that's why the gays and lesbians are leaving the small villages all the time, to the great detriment, because some of them want to keep their family ties. They want to keep living in the north or the south or whatever. But I'm saying culture is so important, not only because it's nice music or a nice drawing, but it gives you a career, it gives you something to live with, it gives you something to share with other people. That's why it's important. And again, I repeat, if you don't have any history, you're in trouble. And we have, I'll give you one example. I think our time is running out. I might not be able to show you the second film, but I'll tell you what it is. Let me give you an example. There's a woman called Tove Jansson. I don't know if you know, Mumintroll was a very famous creature. She didn't come out until very late in her life, but she lived with her woman 40 years, an art professor, historian. But we gave her a diploma for one of her books. She created Mumintroll, which many people know, at least in the Nordic area, even Australia. But anyway, we gave her a diploma and said, shall we wait if she really wants it? Or will it reveal her identity, her sexual identity? We have to be careful because we don't want to make trouble. Finland is a bit of a macho. In the Nordic area, it's kind of the macho nation. Not so easy to come out, like the Danes are a little bit silly in Denmark and they can come out easier. But my point was this. She finally said, yes, I want this diploma. And in her book of autobiography, it says 1990, received Tupilak diploma. And she called me up and I spoke with her on the phone. Tove, you are now an honorary member of Tupilak. She said, no, I want to be a regular member like everybody else. And became a member of Tupilak. And we were proud of her coming out at the age of 70, rather late. But since such a person is so important for everyone in Finland and in Sweden, such a person, when they come out, it adds a great deal of prestige to being LGBT, because not only do they say, I don't care what people say, I am what I am. And I think that's important for all of us to say, look it, I am what I am. You like it, you don't like it. I think that's part of the history and part of the art. More comments on history and culture from you, colleagues? Or
I was thinking about why, another aspect of why it's so important to go into your history, it's that you need to, in order to give this complex picture of like what a tremendous both sacrifices but also creativity and greatness a lot of people have worked under or lived their lives under in terms of queer things. It's if you don't go into that and follow that path, it will be much more what we would call the norm or the majority or the powers that will tell the history, and that story will always be something else. But the way we would tell the history or the way we would seek details from history and how and I'm using we as not in a simple way that it's very easy to define who we are here, but what I mean is that when you look at history, when you look at, for example, the Moomin characters, I would imagine that a lot of people with some kind of queer experience will see other things in all these like different Moomin characters and what they do and how they think, and there will be different ways of like underlines that we will see in their conversations and stuff, and that's very important to show to other people, those kind of experiences are not otherwise going to be known, because it's always going to be different when you look at things from a queer perspective.
Yes.
And I would say that, yeah, for me that's also very important to think of when you work in some kind of queer tradition, as I do in my writing. I would say that the more detailed you go into these kind of things in terms of history and what is going on, and specific also in that sense, I think that the more you create a possibility for other people to see a universal or connect to this in a universal way. And I think that that's a very important aspect of telling the history from, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Good, I'd like to say this. 5 minutes left. I think our film won't be shown, but maybe another time. Let me say this, those of you who are around, October is our Nordic History Culture Month. So if anyone is around in October, we will have a number of sessions. We share the month. We started off in West Pride, Gothenburg, 1st of October. Then Reykjavik, Estonia has the only LGBT film festival in the Baltic region. They will have a couple of days in 2 different cities. Then we will have a number of seminars here in Stockholm, and we finish 10 days with the Copenhagen Film Festival, the biggest and the oldest film festival in the Nordic area. The Danes are very well organized with this film festival. I just want to say that, I'll tell you what this film is. It's called The Night Is Mine, about one of Sweden's most famous painters, Eugene Jansson. He painted giant blue paintings, which he couldn't sell because they were too big. But Stockholm at night, yes, one prince bought one. I think there's a Prince Eugene bought one, but only a prince can afford it. But they were big blue paintings at nighttime, because that was the nighttime when people are on the prowl. But his paintings don't have any human beings. It's just dark blue streets and blue water. And then for some reason, this man flipped out and he said, no more blue. I'm painting naked men. And he went to the baths houses and painted all the naked men there. And his mother was hysterical, and she ripped up some of these paintings and said, no, what is this, these naked men? And they asked him, are you homosexual with these naked? No, he said no, because he was a criminal then, 1915, he would have been a criminal. And one woman wrote out a biography about him and said he is not homosexual because he said he wasn't. And a gay man who's not with us anymore, historian, wrote, oh, yes, he is. I have all his letters and photos of his lover and all the rest. Yes, he is. So this woman said, you're quite right. I guess he was gay. He was gay. And then he made these pictures, these paintings there. History. Sometimes we can't even find our own history because we hide it ourselves. We don't even show it ourselves. Who wants to be arrested? Who wants to be destroyed? Who wants to lose your career? Those are good reasons. Who wants to lose your teeth? That's good reasons to be careful, even here. We have just a minute or two left. Comment, question to our panel here? Question, anything, good people?
I can just say that
yes,
it's so much easier to express what I want to express in song. So if any of you got curious about my songs, I have a few songs in English on my webpage. And there's plenty of stuff on Spotify as well, but that's mainly in Swedish. But
I have one comment.
yes, please.
Do you need a microphone?
Oh, yes, you need the mic. Sorry, I forgot.
First, I just want to say congratulations on the film, which it was really great. No, and I was just thinking about, if you look at, for example, the current resistance against LGBT people's rights and against human rights, sometimes there's a narrative that's being used around traditional values, for example, and I think that's also a reason for increasing the visibility of different ways of living, and gender expressions, and expressing sexuality in the history. As well. That was just a comment from me.
I think you're very right. That's what they use in Hungary and Poland, the traditional values, the family values. Therefore, we have to silence you. Or are you a teacher? Fire you. Are you a doctor? Oh, you can't touch anybody if you're a LGBT person. Are you a nurse? We can't have a lesbian nurse. And fire you. In Belarus, they fire people. In Russia, it is true. You lose your job. And in a place that's closely controlled by the state, you don't say, oh, I'll get another job. I'll just go to the next town, the next factory. You're in trouble. You're in great trouble. It's true. I see by the clock on the wall, our time is out. Do join us in October. We'll have a few more seminars. Please. Thank you. And thank you to Anna-Marie and to Jan Hammerlund. Thank you very much. And to our technician, thank you for helping us.